Welcome to the Loving People Podcast, a ministry of First Southern Baptist Church. We're your hosts, Patrick
and Rita,
and our goal is to point you to Jesus in all struggles of this life. And speaking of struggles, we have struggled again with the intro. And when I say we, I mean me. But here we are. We made it. We made it. I feel like we haven't recorded in a while.
That's the feeling.
That is the feeling. So we're here. Might be a little rusty, but we're here. We're going to have a great conversation. Last week, we got to be really positive the last time. I know we got to kind of talk about what does a healthy marriage look like. And if you are wanting a healthy marriage, maybe you are engaged. I don't know where you're at in life if you're listening to this, but I would definitely say I think anybody could benefit from that. Now, today we're going to be going a little bit of a different direction, still talking marriage, but I guess we could say we're going to be talking red flags in a marriage. And maybe even if you think, well, I don't have really any red flags in my marriage. Well, how do you know if you have red flags? That's basically where we're going today.
That's right.
So Rita, we could say today is for those who maybe they do have some issues or some bumpiness going along in their marriage, or maybe things are great in their marriage and they just want to be able to know, how do I know if everything's good?
Well, and I think in marriage we have to be proactive.
Okay.
We have to know what causes problems and steer away from those. And I hope that for those who think that they really are not having any problems, I hope that you'll see these as things to be cautious on.
Yeah. And it can often be the case that we forget that there are two sides to a marriage, and we think, well, on my side of things, everything's all hunky-dory, everything's great, and then we forget, well, maybe the other side isn't seeing things the same way.
That's right.
And so marriages very often get very bumpy, and sadly, some of the time, they just don't survive that bumpiness. So the divorce rate in the United States, what is it around currently, kind of in the last couple of years?
42%.
Wow, so it's maybe going down. I saw some research recently about it. It's gone down a little bit, the divorce rate, not very much.
It's still hard to think that if there are 4 couples in your church that gets married, there's a pretty good ratio that 2 of them won't make it. That's horrifying.
It is.
That's horrifying.
And we're not here to speak to all the factors as to why that happens, but it does happen. And we in 2024, we got to reckon with that.
That's right. You know, one of the things that in looking at this too, that I really want us to point out, that 41% of first marriages may end in divorce. But if you have a second marriage, the rate increases to approximately 60%. Wow. And then for a third marriage, it's 73%. And we've talked so much about things being disposable. Yeah. That marriage has kind of come along with that. Oh, if this one doesn't work out, I'll try it again. And it just gets easier and easier for us to discard it and not work for it.
I think as people enter their first marriage, they may go into it thinking, you know, I want to make this work. I don't want to. I don't want this to fail. I want it to succeed. But maybe going into a second or third marriage, there can be a shift in mentality.
Well, and
sadly.
I think you've already been through a divorce once, so you think, survived it once, I can do it again. Yeah. And what is really hard is that, and I think we can both attest to that. I've been married 45 years and you've been married
9 years.
The first 5 to 7 years, that's hard. You are learning to live with and to make a life with someone that is not you. And that's hard. And if you can make it to that 7-year stage, good for you. Keep going. You've got the hard part behind you. Everything else you just continue to build on.
Now it's right around that 7 to 8 year mark that's kind of the average length of an initial marriage, right?
That's right.
That's about when, on average, the divorce takes place.
That's right.
And so if you've made it that far, hey, great job, bravo. Marriage isn't easy. It's not designed to be easy. It's designed to be a blessing. It's designed to be good, but well, Lord knows if it's worth it, it's not easy.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and I think that, of course, if we look back at Adam and Eve, God said Adam needed a helper. Mm-hmm. And so we were designed to be in a relationship like that. And I just think about, it's such a blessing. If you can make it with someone 7 years, it's worth the fight. Mm-hmm. It's worth the fight from that point on. You've got through the hard part. Let's just keep digging and going and bringing honor and glory to the Lord at the same time.
We got to keep that in mind. That's
right.
Easy to forget.
It is.
And I think we can really boil it down to this. We look at that person as they sit across the table from us and we ask, are they truly worth it? Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to say yes. Mm-hmm. There are going to be days that we're emotional and we're angry, we're frustrated, and we say no. Yeah. But they are. They really are. So the goal today is to show how can we prevent a divorce from taking place. Like maybe you recognize that there's some rocks being thrown on the road that you're driving down on this thing we call marriage. And how do we clear the path, or how do we get off the bumpy road and back onto the smooth road?
We recognize those red flags.
Yes.
And that the red flags are what we're going to actually say, this is a red flag. And the very first one that we have is lack of communication.
Okay, and we're going to walk through. I've kind of listed out, numbered them. We have 14. So for the type A personalities that are listening along,
hang on.
If you do miss one, or you feel like I'm not sure if that was one of their points, I'm going to detail all these out in the show notes below. So whether that's your Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube, look at the description or show notes, and you can see if you miss something there. We'll number those out for you guys. So you said first one, lack of communication, red flag.
Red flag. How do you know you're not communicating?
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, when one person thinks, we like this, and the other person says, what? I don't like that at all. There's lack of communication. As we get older, as we're in that relationship more, if you'll remember when you're first dating, you're telling each other everything, and everything is in big details, and it's all exciting and it's all new. And by the time you've been married 45 years, you go in and you sit down in the living room and you look at each other and go, okay, we survived another day. and you forget the things that's important. And I'm going to kind of give a little too much information, and feel free to cut this out if you want to. But when I was on vacation not too long ago, I told Kenny, I said, when I call home, I want to know about you. I want to know about the kids. I want to know if there's something important. For this 1 week, I do not care about the dead people in Sebastian County. Because a whole lot of our conversations revolve around work.
Yeah.
And so I want to know what's going on with you.
And for context, so if you're listening to this podcast, she says, I don't want to know about the dead people because Kenny, her husband, is the county coroner.
That's right.
So I don't want there to be any confusion there. I'm sorry. Continue.
That's good. That's good. Give context. But that's a lot of times our conversations go with where he's been during the day, what he's been dealing with. It's my job as his helper to come alongside him and not let him get stuck there. So this was the conversation that while I was on vacation, I want to know about you. I want to know about the kids. I want to know that about things that happened today that's important to you.
Yeah. So then how can we improve if we've got on the bad side of things a lack of communication? How can we improve that?
Ask.
Okay.
Just like with a kid, you don't say, did you have a good day at school? Because what's their answer going to be?
Sure.
It
was fine.
Okay. What'd you do? Nothing. You've got to ask questions that will lead. Patrick, today, what was your favorite thing about today going to work? What was it?
So you got to get specific.
You've got to get specific.
Okay.
You've got to say, okay, Kenny, you seem a little down. Did something happen today that you'd like to talk about? Mm-hmm. Or, I know you had a dentist appointment this morning. Is everything okay? What'd the doctor say? You have to ask questions. You have to know enough about what's going on in their life to ask those questions first and foremost. And then you've got to be willing to put yourself out there and then listen.
Communication is a two-way street.
It is.
Okay, and we can often make it a one-way street. Maybe we're the ones that we're trying to be a good spouse, and we're saying, I just want to know about you. I just want to listen, which we would both commend that to the highest degree. But if you're still not sharing about your own life, then you're only doing half the battle at that point.
That's right.
Two-way street.
And whenever there's lack of communication, it always sets us up to have our feelings hurt. Well, he didn't really care about this in my life, or he would have asked.
Yeah.
That sets us up for problems to start with. Then I begin to get mad because he didn't stop and ask. Well, I should have said, hey, don't forget, I've got a doctor's appointment today. Or don't forget, I'm headed into town to, do whatever.
Yeah.
We've got to be honest, and we've got to hold that up. It's easy for us to fall into the category of talking about the kids, talking about work, talking about everything else, but that's not what's always in the heart.
Yeah, and maybe in your marriage you are incredibly busy, and Maddie and I have found ourselves in that season lately to where we're both working full-time jobs, and these jobs have us working sometimes kind of crazy hours. I might work and go to a football game till 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and so I'm not home until 8:30. She's put the kids down to sleep, and then I've got seminary stuff to do. So by the time I get in bed, she's asleep, and so we don't get to talk. So there are seasons when you're busy and you have to be intentional and find times to talk. So maybe that means you just call each other at lunchtime and you sit and you talk a little bit. And so we've had to find some creative ways around that. But that's another way to kind of look out is the busyness of life.
And I think that's where we all find ourselves at different points. Proverbs 18:13 says, if one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. How quick am I to be thinking about what I'm going to say before Kenny finishes that sentence?
Yeah.
I'm already thinking of my rebuttal. That's not what communication's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, I know we've mentioned that before. It's listening to respond instead of listening to listen, right?
Yeah.
And so I know you got one more verse, and we need to keep moving because we've got 13 more here. Proverbs 6:24. What does that say?
Kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body.
Come on.
Without healthy communication, there's frustration, there's concern, and it can turn into a big fat red flag.
So let's turn that red flag into a green flag. Communicate,
That's
y'all.
right.
There we
That's
go.
right.
Number 2. Red flag is
lack of intimacy.
Okay.
I'm not just talking physical intimacy. There has to be an emotional connection.
Now, let's make that incredibly clear. Say it louder for the people in the back. All
That's
that.
right.
Not just physical intimacy,
but emotional.
Also emotional. Okay.
If there are problems in your marriage, you will find yourself confiding in someone else. That is a red flag with a skull and crossbones on it. It's headed to disaster.
So maybe an easy way to know is to ask yourself, if I am in a difficult position and maybe I need to talk to somebody about something very serious, who do I first go to?
That's right.
And if your answer is somebody other than your spouse, and definitely if it is somebody of the same sex, of your spouse that is not your spouse, then that is a huge red flag. That's not just a little red flag. That's not just a little ant. That's a
dinosaur.
That's we got Godzilla coming for you now.
That's
that is
right.
a huge red flag.
It is. And so much of the time we justify it as, well, he's been my friend forever. He knows our history. It doesn't matter. When you respond emotionally and become dependent on another, in my case, another male other than my husband, that is wrong. That is a huge red flag. I've got to run from that. My husband needs to be the one that I'm going to, even if it's not always easy.
Yeah. Because if that, you open that door, it is a road toward headache, heartache, and ultimately disaster.
That's right.
Yes, even though you don't think that going into it, but we want to say, notice that red flag, put a magnifying glass on it, put a telescope on it so you can see it. We want to help you guys out there. So this could take intentionality of you saying, hey, I want to have intimacy, emotionally speaking, with my spouse.
Well, and if the emotional intimacy is there, the physical will come.
There you go. Okay. Be careful of the order,
That's
maybe.
right. That's right.
I think young couples can probably miss that and get the order wrong.
Yes.
So I think one thing that is we've counseled couples in premarital counseling is to look at the love languages. You know, some people aren't a big fan of it. I think they're a really cool resource to use. And one thing that people may miss is everybody's got their love language. For some, it might be quality time. For others, it might be physical touch. For others, it's gift giving, letters, whatever it may be. But we tend to love others with our personal love language. And so in doing so, we forget they want to be loved in their love language. And as we read that book, the author made a great point. He said, if you are, you have like a love tank, kind of like a gas tank, and it's running toward E, and your love language is gift giving, and another person's is food, and they bring you food or something, that's not going to fill your love tank, but a gift might. So we have to be intentional and know our spouse's love language, and that's a form of intimacy.
It is.
And refilling that tank.
Well, and I'll give a perfect example on this. Kenny's love language is physical touch. Mine is not. I have a bubble around me. Anybody who knows me knows that. So I have to intentionally, especially if we're in a group, if I lay my hand on his arm, or if I have my arm on the back of the chair and I touch his shoulder, it fills his tank. Yeah. Now, that's not all I have to do, but I'm just saying it's the little things that begin to matter. And that's something I have to work on every single day, because it's just not in my personality. I'm not a touchy person.
And how many years have y'all been married?
45.
45 years. And still,
yeah, it's still
you
a struggle.
To be intentional.
That's right. And I have to work on that. So I love the 5 love languages. I use that a lot because you do have to think about that other person. You have to put them first.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're wondering, maybe just as kind of a side note, what is mine or my spouse's love language? If you go to their website, 5 love languages, just Google it. They have a free quiz you can do on their website, and you can find that. You don't have to read the whole 200-page book. So you can do this quiz in like 5 minutes.
And then you can do research on if my love language is this and my spouse's is that, how do I show them love?
Yeah.
You can Google that too. And it will show them. It will give you a list of these are things that you can do.
That's so cool.
And it's helpful.
I love that. So number 2, lack of intimacy. Let's turn that into a green flag. Find a way to intentionally be intimate with your spouse. Boom. Number 3, an emotional affair. And I don't think we could make this red flag any bigger and say, hey, be careful here, because this is a slippery slope and incredibly dangerous.
Ephesians 5:4 says, let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude jokes, which are out of place, but instead let there be thanksgiving. When you start joking around and flirting with members of the opposite sex, you are opening yourself up for problems.
That's right.
Crude jokes in a workplace, not appropriate. In mixed company, I don't even like it when men do it, but especially if a woman is present, that's not appropriate at all.
Yeah. So an easy way of saying this is boundaries. There's that book by Henry Cloud. I would suggest it for anybody. Set appropriate boundaries for the sake of your health, for the sake of your marriage, for the sake of your family.
There's another book that Lisa Turkhurst has that's Good Boundaries, Goodbye.
Okay, good boundaries,
and
goodbye.
That's where if you already have messy boundaries, how you can go back and clean them up.
Yeah.
So we can either set them or we can clean up the mess afterwards.
And I think the boundaries idea, that's good for anybody because that doesn't apply only to those within a marriage. That applies to friendships. That applies to family. We've actually been walking some of our college students through some of that right now. And they're just seeking healthy boundaries in their lives. So an emotional affair, let's turn that one to a green flag, is set appropriate boundaries.
That's right.
Yeah, that it doesn't have to happen. That is totally preventable. Number 4 red flag is spending less time together, or you don't enjoy spending time together.
When you find yourself at that point, and it happens a lot of times, especially just after the kids move out, you're sitting in the living room and you're looking at each other and you're going, what now?
Or who are you?
What have I done? We could go on with what that is. But if you will stop and you will ask yourself, what drew us together to start with? When Kenny and I were dating, we both had younger siblings that played basketball. Our dating life was at their basketball games. And we had fun. And we enjoyed it. We enjoyed being around other people. We cheered for them. Okay, so what's my answer now? When I'm sitting and we're looking at each other, that's what we enjoyed together. So let's either go to a ball game or let's watch one on TV or let's do something like that we enjoyed together. That's the best thing you can do, is to go back and look what drew us to this point.
Yeah. That's a cool thing. So simple, though. So simple. Go back to the beginning. Or as the younger people say, let's run it back.
Yeah. You also, one more thing in this, you also need to identify what's the problem. If I don't want to spend time with you, why is that? Yeah. And then we'll go back to the communication. And if you find that you don't want to spend time with a spouse because they don't listen to you, you have to communicate that. You have to say, okay, I'm struggling in this area. I don't feel like you're really listening to me. And when that happens, I really don't like being around you. Let's change that.
Yeah. And that requires being open and being honest. Don't worry about hurting feelings. That's because right. you got to be able to be open anyway. And be honest. Exactly. And not talking about it's only going to make things worse. That's and right. fester. So, that's number 4. Number 5 is trust issues. Speak to that a little bit.
I cannot tell you how many times this past week trust has come up in conversations. In just about every one of my counseling sessions, that has been an issue. When trust is broken, it takes time and it takes work to repair it. Yeah. But it's vital. Time and work. 2 essential ingredients to trust. It is. And without, even if you have a good relationship with your spouse, you have to practice trusting God in everyday situations. It does not come naturally to us as humans. We are a distrustful society because we know the sin in our own lives.
I was going to say, we have a good reason to be.
We do.
Sadly.
We do. But that a lot of times translates into we're not completely trusting in the Father. And I always tell my life group, either on one hand you trust him or on the other hand you don't. And there's nothing between that.
Yeah. So if trust is a red flag, then how do we fix that?
Don't keep secrets.
Okay.
If something is bothering you, say so. Yeah. If something has happened that is heavy on your heart, I see my spouse as my safe zone. He may talk to a lot of people about a lot of things, but he does not share the deepest, darkest things in my heart. Yeah. He holds them close because he loves me. So when I am just almost distraught over something, he'll say, "What is it?"
Yeah.
And at that moment, I can choose to tell him, "I'm struggling with this," or "I was encountered by that," or "This really made me uncomfortable." And of course, if you know Kenny Hobbs, you know his first instinct is, "Well, I'll tell them." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. Just hang on. I just need you to listen."
Yeah.
That's where the trust starts. I don't need you to fix it. I don't need you to intervene on my behalf. I just need you to tell me it's really going to be okay.
Yeah. Got that right. So there's two sides to this street of trust. Maybe you're on the side where you're struggling to trust. Ask questions. Get intentional. Get personal there.
Well, get clarification a lot of times.
Maybe you're on the side where you've broken trust. You've got some work to do. And one, you've got to be patient. We live in a microwave culture where we expect everything to be done incredibly fast. This is going to be crock pot. This is going to take some time. So patience and intentionality, and you said work.
Yeah.
I think that's, you're going to have to be open about some things. You're going to have to be extra open about some things. You're going to have to answer questions that you may not want to answer.
That's right.
And if you've broken trust, you've got no right to
Deny
be upset
it.
about
That's
that.
right. Well, and even you may have to have, a 360 put on your phone.
Yep.
So that you can be accountable, because in that lack of trust, security is broken. And especially women want security. They want to be secure in their relationships. They don't want to have to wonder about them. And so if trust has been broken, you have to be willing to go above and beyond to rebuild that trust, that security for that person, to let them know you're not going to let them down.
Yeah. What lengths would you go to restore that trust?
That's right.
Because the lengths that you would go to restore the trust are the lengths that you would go to see your marriage thrive.
That's right.
And we have to do that.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's number 5. If we turn trust issues into a green flag, it's doing the work and being patient to restore trust where it's been broken. And it's possible. I don't want to be kind of a negative Ned there and say, hey, it's going to take time and it's going to take work.
But it does.
But in that process, you can restore trust. Yeah. Let's give them some hope here. Whoever's listening to this, if you have breached trust, there is hope. Yeah. And maybe you're on the side where you've been
the recipient.
Yes. So I can't talk. You've been the recipient and you feel like you can't trust your spouse. There is hope for you as well.
That's right. And sometimes when that person comes to you and says, I was wrong, true repentance is a turning, a change in our behavior.
Come on.
So if they say, I'm sorry, I want to change, you have an obligation to give them a chance. I'm not saying you got to hand them everything, but I am saying you have to be willing to move toward them. And it takes 100% on both persons' parts.
Good word. Good word. Number 6, cheating and adultery. Now we're getting really messy.
We don't
want to cover this one, but we have
there's
to.
so much. When you break the trust of your spouse and you have cheated, there is pain, there's distrust, there's anger, there's hurt, there's dishes being thrown, there's all kinds of stuff.
And rightfully so.
And rightfully so. But you still have to come back to the point that if you are willing to fix it, if you're willing to change, you have to do a complete turn. And that doesn't mean you're still going to be friends with that other person on Facebook. You're still going to have their number in your phone. You're going to go to places that you know that they'll be. That's not at all healthy for your relationship. Yeah. That's what got you in this problem to start with.
That's right.
So you have to be willing when your spouse says, you cheated, I want a clean break, to say, no problem. Clean break. I'm good with that. We'll take it. You can hold me accountable. Here's the password to my phone.
Yep.
Check me. Hold me to this.
Yep. You got some verses here.
I do. I'm sitting here thinking, oh my stars, that's heavy.
It is. This is, of all the things that we're talking about here, it's heavy. This is a tough one.
Yeah. Well, the Bible is clear about it. So there's no
good there. There's no gray area.
Black and white. I mean, it's all black and white. There's no gray. If you find someone other than your partner attractive, you must change your thoughts about this whole situation. While it might feel good at the moment to have another person meet your needs, it is not biblical and will lead to monumentous consequences. Jeremiah 17:7 says, "Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord and whose hope is in him." Also in Psalms 112:7, "He will not be afraid of evil tidings. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord." If you're tempted to cheat, stop. Change your thoughts and trust that the Lord will turn your heart toward him. Be intentional.
Yeah. Run to your spouse
That's
as well.
right.
Run to your spouse. You made vows. Stick to them.
That's right.
Stay close. And maybe too, have a person of the same sex. So if you're a woman, have a woman in your life. And if you're a man, have a man in your life that can help keep you accountable.
That's true.
That is,
well, and even in the very beginning, after a cheating spouse is the light shown and it's public. If you feel like I'm not ready to go to my spouse with this, go to the Father. Ask him for guidance. Ask him for wisdom. Ask him to work on your heart first.
Yeah.
And then on the spouse's heart. Because as your heart softens and you become more in line with what God wants, that spouse probably did not cheat for no reason. It takes two of us. And so if that spouse has cheated, there's probably something that I could have done different.
And we want to say that cautiously.
Yes.
Yes. That is often the case, but not always the case.
No, that's very true. But if you run to the Father first and you lay your heart out before him, he will direct your path.
Yeah.
He'll take care of it.
Yeah. He won't lead us astray. And if you are being led astray, it's not the Spirit of the Lord you are seeking. All right, number 7 is another very heavy one. It's abuse. Now, marriages, sadly, there are abusive marriages.
Yeah.
And that can look different in different contexts. So we can say abuse can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be verbal, it can be sexual, but it's all under the umbrella and the banner of abuse.
And it indicates a lack of respect in the marriage. If I have no self-respect and I was raised in an abusive home, I may continue that cycle. I have confessed to my children as they were growing up, I was a yeller. I didn't think that they were listening to me unless I was yelling at them. And that can be seen as a form of abuse. And while I would never intentionally hurt my kids, I'm sure I did. And I have gone back and told them I'm sorry. I've confessed it to the Father. I've asked for a change. And not too long ago in dealing with Bentley, Lance asked me, "Who are you?" Because I deal with my grandkids different than I did my kids because I've learned.
Yeah.
I've grown in this. There's so many scriptures that we can go to. There's Isaiah 53, 5 and 6. Psalms 22, 7 and 8, Psalms 22, 16. There's just all kinds of resources in our Bible. And if you find that you are in a situation of physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, or even verbal abuse, please reach out to someone. Ask for help. we can sit down, we can show you what the Bible says about this. We can help you pray, we can give you information, we can give you the resources, and that's what we're here for. Is to fill you with the resources that you need to set up those boundaries and to make those changes. Just like I said, if I am the abuser with my yelling, I need to stop that. If you need help with this, call me.
Yeah.
Because I'll be glad to sit down and say, okay, these are mistakes I made. This is how I wish I could change it. And I'll tell you what really gets my attention is when I hear one of my kids say something I said. It breaks my heart. And I think, Father, please break this cycle.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's not anything. DHS would never get involved in what happened at my home. But I hurt my children. I hurt my spouse with my small muscle of a tongue.
James 3 right there. Tame the tongue. What humility it takes to say all that, right? And we do want to say, if you find yourself maybe on the more extreme side of physical abuse, there are abuse hotlines. We would definitely encourage you to reach out to. The Bible and God, He does not endorse abuse by any means.
Ever.
It is against every bit of His design. He's a gracious and a loving Father who doesn't want to reach out and give us abusive lashes.
That's right.
He took those lashes for us.
That's right.
And wants to step into our story and help us.
He offers us correction.
Yes.
Not punishment.
That's right. Discipline is meant to be corrective.
That's right.
Yeah. So we do want to make that kind of clarification there. So abuse is not only unhealthy, it is just flat out wrong.
That's
so
right.
if you are the abuser, stop, repent, and seek restoration. And if you are being abused, it's okay to step out of that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Ask for help.
Yes.
That's what your churches are supposed to be here for.
Yeah. And that's a hard one. That's a heavy one, but it needs to be said. Number 8, feeling contempt for your partner. Now, I don't think any of us enter into marriage from we're at our wedding day, we're at the altar, we're doing our I do's, we're smiling at each other and all that kind of stuff. We're so excited, and then we have no idea that years down the road we may be looking at our spouse as they sit on the other side of the couch and thinking, why did I marry you? A contempt for our partner.
What changed?
What changed? Okay.
That's where you have to start. What changed? Did I change? Did they change? Did we both move apart? What changed? It goes back to what I was talking about a while ago. You have to say, what drew me to this person? What was it that I saw in my spouse that I fell in love with? You know, I tease Kenny a lot. He's normally, to most people, a pretty funny guy. With me, maybe he's not so funny anymore. After 45 years, I've kind of heard all those jokes, and I'm like, that's
Get
not
some
funny
new
anymore.
material.
Yeah. And we laugh about that. But one of the things that drew me to him was his outgoing nature, which I'm not. And he was funny. He was fun to be around. Well, now when I'm critical of him for being outgoing and funny, he can say to me, what is your deal? That's why you chose me.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to go back and we have to look at it. Obviously, in those situations, my attitude has changed. I have to go back and I have to give him a break and say, okay, that was funny. and give him a little bit of that. And he always laughs then and tells me how lucky I am. And we go down that road. But, you know, that's where we have to go when you're feeling that contempt. It didn't just grow overnight. It came because of lack of communication and that you've grown apart and that you no longer plugging into what the other one is needing, that communication, that care that the other person wants. It grows into contempt.
So if you're looking at a lake of contempt, you have to ask yourself, what are the rivers and what are the tributaries, what are the streams that are flowing into that? And once you figure those out and you can dam those off, then
Well,
that
and
lake will dry up and that contempt will be gone.
I will tell you something else. A lot of times, especially in the situation of a woman, if you are out in the workplace and you have a boss or a customer or someone that is saying, you're doing a great job, and your husband at home is saying, why don't you ever cook? That's where those rivers, they've got to be blocked off.
Yeah.
Because you've got to get your cup filled at home. And that you have to be very careful of that. And that goes back into some of those other red flags. But even a very innocent compliment from your boss can make you feel a way your spouse hasn't made you feel in a while. And that, well, why can't you talk to me like so-and-so talks to me? And it builds and it festers and it gets bigger and uglier.
Wow. A lot of wisdom in that. Number 9, feeling controlled by your partner. I guess as if you are the claw in the machine where you're trying to get all the stuffed animals and they got the joystick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Control freaks. We all have them. In fact, probably I would venture to guess in most marriages, one is more controlling and the other one is more carefree. I am the control freak.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. I like to know what we're doing. I want to know a list of how it's going to be done. I want to know where we're going to go after this. I want to know if you have your list ready, and I want to control it all. And I have learned, in fact, I have a little piece of paper that I give out to counselees. There's things that they are within my control, and there are things that are outside of my control. Yeah, that's the way it works. And I have to remember, okay, that's not my thing. That's not in my control. I can't control how he acts. I can't control what he thinks. I can't control the future. I can't control the past. What I can control is my reaction, my walk with God, my work on this relationship. Those are the things I can control. If he responds great, if he doesn't, I still have what's within my control to do.
Yeah.
And I have to remember that because people don't like to be controlled.
Nobody does. We don't want to be puppets with strings attached.
Well, and I'll tell you one more thing on communication. I know I keep going on and on.
You're controlling this podcast.
I am. I'm controlling this podcast. But when you talk about feelings, you cannot tell me, Rita, that didn't hurt your feelings. They're my feelings. You can't control those.
Good word.
And even if it was unintentional, I need to learn how to respond to an unintentional hurt. But my hurt feelings are my hurt feelings. And I have to deal with those.
Yeah. All right, number 10. We got 5 more. Complaining about your partner to others. And I want to say this again. Complaining about your partner to others. I don't care who that is. Don't call your mom and complain about your spouse.
She won't forgive as quickly as
yeah.
you do.
Definitely don't call your mother-in-law and complain about your spouse. But no matter who it is, whether that's a friend, whether that's your mom, whether that's a family member, a coworker, you can't go and complain about your spouse because your words, as we mentioned earlier, James 3, we have to tame the tongue because we don't realize we can convince ourselves of things that are not true so quickly by just talking about it.
Negative self-talk.
Yes. And then not only are we damaging their reputation and the view of them from our own perspective, we're doing that before others as well. And we're demonizing them unfairly and possibly untruly before others, which is just flat out sin. Well,
and as Kenny's helper, it is my responsibility to build him up, to keep making him look good. That's why I dress him every Sunday.
Oh, okay. Now we know how it happens.
But it's seriously, the other day we got out of the car for a funeral and I stopped and turned around and began to button the collar. And he said, "What would I do without you making me look good?" That's what we're here for.
Did you tell him to remember those words?
Yeah, I did. And he went, "You're still the luckiest woman in the world." So, but that's our role. We need to build them up. We need to make them look good. And if I'm going to have to complain to someone, I need to be complaining to the Father.
Come on.
About them. Because, Lord, you're the only one that can change both of our hearts.
Yeah.
And he already knows what our complaints are, so we're just confessing them to him.
Good word. So turning that one into a green flag is, instead of complaining about them to others, it is building them up.
That's right.
And sometimes that can be hard. Sometimes all you're going to want to see is the negative, and you have to push through that and find something to praise.
That's right.
And we would say, do it. Number 11, being shamed by your partner. Now, be clear, this is a form of abuse, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Anytime that a spouse publicly shames, or even privately shames, the house isn't up to standards. You should have done. That's a form of shaming, and that's abuse.
Yeah.
Now, it's not physical, but it's hurtful, and that's where the abuse comes in.
Right.
You're tearing down.
Exactly. And we were never called to tear down God's image. We know that's what human beings are. When you made vows, you did not vow to tear them down. You vowed to build them up, to help one another in sickness and in health, and all things.
Till death do us part.
That's right. So maybe you're the one who has been shamed. We want to personally say we are sorry that that's not fair to you. I can say I've definitely had days where, I'm tired, I'm frustrated to get home and something's not clean, and I've made a comment, and I see the tears begin to flow down Maddie's face, especially in our first 2 or 3 years of marriage.
Yeah.
But it took me a couple years to understand this is genuinely and truly a partnership.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I've been on the side of things where I've said things that I shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
And
we all have.
Yeah. And it's taken time to overcome that. And sometimes you may make a comment without even realizing what you're saying. So we have to, like we've said already, be intentional with our words and be very cautious and careful with our words. Because words, as Russ always says, they have the power to give life, or they have the power to just absolutely demolish.
That's right. I saw an illustration not too long ago on Facebook where they squeeze toothpaste out of a tube. Once those words come out of your mouth, you can't put them back.
There you go. Remember that. So let's turn this one into a green flag. Instead of shaming your partner,
build them up.
Give words of life. And it may be hard for you, but once you start doing it, it's a lot easier than you realize. And maybe something, if you don't do a gratitude journal, maybe try a gratitude journal once a day, specifically for your spouse. Here's why I'm grateful for my spouse every single day, and share it with them. Send it to them in a text, or write it on a sticky note and put it on their mirror so when they wake up they see it.
Let them find a love note in their car.
Yeah. I did that one day, and this was a while back. I put one on the seat in front of Esther, where she gets, my oldest daughter, if you don't know her, and then one in front of my wife. And Maddie was like, that was really nice. But Esther, oh my goodness, she just ate it up. She talked about it for a week.
And you're setting an example of what she should expect in a spouse. Because you don't want her to have anything less than the best.
No, not that I'm the best. Number 12, lack of shared interest.
This goes back to what brought you together. Yeah. What drew you? What are your shared interests? There, especially, like I said, after the kids left home, Kenny and I kind of look at each other like, what are we going to do? We can't agree on television shows. We can't agree on movies. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Because we had different interest. And there was, for a period of time, I found myself back in my craft room while he was watching movies in the living room, and we decided very quickly that wasn't going to work either. So we had to find things that we're interested in together. We're still searching for those.
It takes a lifetime, doesn't it?
It does.
45 years later.
That's right.
13, one or the other does not show support or empathy during difficult times. Now, I think this is probably pretty common. Now, every marriage is going to face difficult times, but maybe you're the one that's going through the more difficult time, and your husband or your wife is looking at you like,
what's your problem?
yeah, get over it. What do we need to know there?
I think that during that time, you have to put yourself aside. If we look at, I have a counselor that calls it the order of operation, but where God's first and your spouse is second, and then on down the list, you have your hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so if God is truly first, that husband or wife has to be second. You have to put them above yourself. Yeah. And as we said earlier in the podcast, that Kenny is the coroner. So there are times that he comes home and it's heavy.
Yeah.
And while I may or may not want to know what's going on, I have to let him vent. I have to let him unload that. And in doing so, we'll pray for the families. I will let him grieve when he needs to grieve. And then we'll say, okay, we need to see the kids. We're going to go hug a grandkid. Or something like that you have to let that happen. You have to be understanding. And it's not even so much, only in a situation like he's in, but if your spouse is struggling at work and feels unappreciated and, not properly compensated, and everybody else is getting things and she's working these long hours, you have to say, I know that doesn't feel fair, but I appreciate what you're doing. I see what you're doing. I recognize what you're doing. It goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, even though, be careful quoting this movie, one of the Frozen movies. But I think it's Olaf says, you feel what you feel, and those feelings are real.
That's right.
If your spouse is feeling something in the moment where they're going through something, let them feel that.
And you can't control it.
Yeah. And I don't know, we've said last season was all about emotions on the podcast. Mm-hmm. Emotions are not reliable. We need to be careful. Don't let emotions be your compass, because they will lead you astray.
That's right.
But it's okay to feel sad every now and then. It's okay to feel. So in that moment, don't look at your spouse and say, really? Get over it. Men especially need to hear me. I need to hear myself on this. Let your spouse feel. And I know my wife, being a teacher down in Greenwood, and Greenwood going through a really difficult time lately, I've had to remind myself, Patrick, you're not in the schools down there in Greenwood. You're not in that specific elementary school every day. You're not interacting with these kids daily on the playground and all that. So whenever a tragedy occurs, it doesn't affect me the same way it affects my wife. Right. And when my wife finds out some news about things that happen to these students, I have to find a way to enter into that story and let her feel and support her in those feelings.
And sometimes she just needs you to hold her.
Yes. Yeah. And
just say, I'm so sorry, I'm here.
And in our culture, has not necessarily equipped men to do that. That's well. Right. So let me challenge men in that aspect.
Yeah.
Last one, number 14, is having the same argument over and over and over. Maybe you have said, hey, I'm going to do the dishes, you do the laundry, or maybe you've done something where you've made a promise, I'm going to do this, and then you haven't done it, and you fight about it over and over and over.
That's a red flag.
Okay, red flag. Okay.
When something like that happens, you have to evaluate, what's my part? What am I doing? I may be doing everything I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Okay, then that's great. Lean over and help.
Yeah.
Don't continue having the same argument over and over and over and over.
Because there's got to be a reason.
Yeah.
And maybe we're missing the main thing there.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of times finances come under this. There is the same argument month after month after month. Why are we spending so much money on blank?
Yeah.
If that's a problem, evaluate. Am I really spending too much money on blank? And if I am, how do I stop? How do I slow this down? How do I change what I'm doing so we don't have this argument over and over? I know when Kenny and I were first married, finances was a big deal because we had none. And, it was like, okay, we've got to make every nickel stretch. Yeah. And in that, we would have the same argument each month until I finally learned, okay, how am I going to change my part of it? I'm still not great at it. With us, I'm the spender, he's the saver. So I have to be real cautious. And there's a lot of times he'll come in and say, I looked at the bank account today and it said brr, and I thought it was going to say brr. And, and I'll go, hang on. We had insurance that came due. Oh, okay. So I've learned over the years how to keep us from having that same argument. Instead of me getting defensive and saying, why are you always asking me about this? To say, here's what happened. Here's what the big expense was. And he's fine with that. And we don't argue about it anymore.
Yeah.
So it can be finances, it can be discipline on kids, it can be whatever.
So if we turn this one into a green flag, we could say, find the reason for the argument and cut it off.
Yeah. On both sides.
Yes.
If one is being overly controlling, stop it. If the other one is spending excessively or being too lenient, stop it. Meet in the middle.
Just imagine that. We could make a little soundbite of that of you going, stop it.
Stop it.
That's what we need.
That's right. Stop that.
So those are your 14 things, and most of these we've said, hey, these don't have to be a negative. They can actually be turned into a green flag. Praise God for that. Is there anything you want to add at the end before we close this down?
There's always hope.
Oh. Okay.
Do not just throw the towel in on a marriage because you've got 13 out of 14 of these red flags. You can change them.
What if they find themselves in some of these red flags and they've tried to work through them themselves, turn them into green flags?
Ask for help.
Okay, there you go.
Ask for help. Go to your pastor. Go to a trusted Christian friend. Go to your biblical counselor.
Wait. We have one of those, don't we?
Yes, we do. Go to someone who's invested. Your life group teachers. Go to someone that you can say, I need an objective, godly view on this. Yeah. But first and foremost, always take it to the Father.
I don't think you could have any better advice. Run to the Lord. I love that song, Run to the Father. Do that with even your marital problems.
That's right.
And then if you're still having issues, ask for help.
That's right.
That there's no shame in that.
That's right.
There's wisdom in that, we could say. So we want to say thank you for listening. It was a long episode. It was a heavy episode, but there is hope for every marriage as long as you are going to run to the Father and seek Jesus in the midst of that.
I think that there's a song right now. There's a hope. His name is Jesus.
Okay.
Look it up on Spotify.
We're going to check it out after you listen to this podcast.
That's right.
Look it up. Yeah. Well, hey, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed listening, don't forget to leave us a good review, whether you are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Hit that subscribe button as well on YouTube. And tell your friends about it. Share it on Facebook. Send a text message. Now, be careful with this episode. We don't want you to think like you're telling the others, hey, you need a better marriage. But maybe you can even listen to this with your spouse.
That's right.
We just want to be a blessing to you, introduce you to the love of Jesus every step of the way. And don't forget to love God
and love people.
We'll see you guys.